Houston. Houston, we have a problem. DJ Apollo has landed. I repeat, DJ Apollo has landed.
Good afternoon. You are listening to the Tales of Music and Film podcast. My name is Christian Taylor, and thank you for clicking on today's recording. We are going to have ourselves some good fun today because in this recording, I'm actually going to be changing it up a little bit. We are not going to be reviewing a film or any kind of music or album. We are going to be covering something very different. So, I've been sitting here thinking about changing up on how I do recordings. I thought it'd be cool to start doing a new thing where I do recordings, having a discussion with all you listening in, talking about certain topics. Because I noticed a recording that I did way back during my early months of senior year in college, where I did an episode with my good buddy Marshall Matters. I invited him on the show, and him and I did a recording talking about movies that we thought could use a sequel. And I noticed recently that that recording has been gaining a lot of attention. It went from about, I would say, 12, 13, listens. The number has now jumped to 45. Now, I'm very happy that all of you are really enjoying that episode, so it got me thinking, why not do something like that again? So the idea I had, how about we talk about some films that were canceled that would have been very cool to see, in my opinion. So that's what we're going to be doing with this recording. I did some research and I found 5 films that I wish we could have gotten to see. So this is going to be a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this recording, and let's have ourselves some fun. So, the first movie that I want to discuss, is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 4. Now, I'm sure it's no surprise to all you listening in. I've talked about this, many, many times, especially if you have listened to my recording covering Spider-Man 2. The Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, I consider to be one of the greatest hero trilogies ever made. It's up there with, the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy. I think Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy beats every movie we have in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They are that good. You can just feel the love and passion with each film, and the whole trilogy is fantastic. I love Spider-Man 3, and I'm not sorry. So, Sam did have plans to make a 4th film, but sadly, he dropped out of the project because he really blamed himself for how Spider-Man 3 turned out, but honestly, I don't think it was his fault. If you guys remember, I have mentioned that, Sony, one of the greatest, film companies ever, wink, wink, totally not sarcasm, Sony has a very horrible habit of interfering with film projects because they believe that they have to put in their 2 cents all the time about what should happen in the film, and this company has shown time and time again they know absolutely nothing about filmmaking. They are known for interfering with film projects all the time, and a good example of this was the 2 live-action Venom films that we've gotten recently over the past few years. Because universe forbid, they can't just let the director they hired do their thing and make their film. So, yeah. Sony was, in my opinion, the big reason for why some parts of Spider-Man 3 turned out the way they did. Because Sony forced Sam Raimi to put Venom in the movie, and he had no plans whatsoever to have Venom featured in Spider-Man 3. The original plan was that Sandman was going to be the main villain, and Harry Osborn was going to be a side villain, and Sam Raimi was planning on wrapping up Harry's story in the 3rd film. And that was the original idea. It sounds amazing, but of course Sony, in all their, quote, wisdom, believed it'd be better to have Venom featured in Spider-Man 3 because they wanted to sell more toys. So Sam, at the last minute, had to do some massive rewrites for Spider-Man 3 and have Venom be one of the main villains. And when you watch the film, you know, it's you can tell that there's just too many villains. And that was one of the main complaints that the fan base had with the third movie. They felt the quality of Spider-Man 3 really dropped, and they felt that this film did not match the two films that came before. So due to all the negative feedback that Sam got for Spider-Man 3, he decided to drop out of making Spider-Man 4. And from what I found, it seems that Spider-Man 4 seemed to have had a due date of arriving in theaters somewhere in 2010. And the movie was going to feature, they wanted to hire John Malkovich, great actor. They wanted him to play the Vulture. Now, I've pictured John Malkovich in the Vulture suit many times. That would have been amazing to see. I'm a big fan of him and his work. I think he would have pulled off that role very well. And they wanted to cast Anne Hathaway as Black Cat, and I think that would have been amazing cast decision as well. And I thought it was pretty funny that Anne Hathaway would go on to play Catwoman in Batman The Dark Knight Rises, which was the third film of the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy. And the movie was, and Spider-Man 4 was also going to feature Bruce Campbell as Mysterio, and it was going to explain his Bruce's cameos in the previous three movies. Now that, like, those casting decisions sound so perfect. Like, I would have paid to see this in theaters. You can actually find some of the early sketches that were done, and one of the sketches that I found was Spider-Man arresting Mysterio and taking him into jail. And that would have been very interesting to see, you know? Now, before we go any further, I just want to say that I did do some research over the 5 films that we are going to discuss, and I found some websites that featured very amazing articles that go into good detail regarding why the film was canceled and what led to it. So I'm going to make sure that with these articles, I'm going to mention the website name that I got them from, and I'm going to mention the name of the author who wrote the articles, just to give them a shout out, just to make sure that I'm not stealing their work. I'm just using it to help, you know, give you guys some good information. So I just want to make sure that I'm not stealing their work, and I just want to let you guys know that this is not my work, this is someone else's. So Screen Rant is where I got this information that I'm about to read to you, and it's from an article written by David Miller. So the article goes like this. Although Sam Raimi has no plans for a Spider-Man 4 yet, he has noted necessary character and story details for Tobey Maguire's return as Spider-Man and the potential introduction of another Spider hero following his MCU cinematic debut. The MCU's Phase 4 saw both Tobey Maguire and Sam Raimi return to Marvel adaptations, with the former reprising his Spider-Man role in Spider-Man No Way Home, and the latter directing Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Unsurprisingly, this has renewed interest among viewers in seeing both Maguire and Raimi return once more for a Spider-Man 4. The Sam Raimi Spider-Man franchise nearly continued in the early 2010s with Spider-Man 4, which would have featured the Vulture as its primary antagonist. Sam Raimi stepped down from the director's role before the film was finished, leading Sony to reboot the franchise with 2012's Amazing Spider-Man starring Andrew Garfield. If Sam Raimi were to make a Spider-Man 4 now, it would likely be a significantly different film from what he initially planned, with his comments in No Way Home's story hinting at potential storylines including perhaps a new Spider-Man themed hero. Spider-Man 4 nearly included a montage of Spider-Man fighting supervillains, including Bruce Campbell as Mysterio, a decision that could have potentially referenced elements of the Raimi Spider-Man franchise's spin-off materials, which brought a multitude of Marvel superheroes and supervillains into the Raimi universe. Now, I have noticed that there has been a big resurgence in fans wanting a Sam Raimi Spider-Man 4, and honestly, I'm all for it. I would go to theaters to see that in a heartbeat. Yes, I know that Tobey Maguire is around like 47 years old now, but I don't think it's too late. I really don't. I think it would still work. I've seen some fans complain saying that a fourth film isn't necessary because they believe that Tobey Maguire is now way too old to play Spider-Man, but I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we have Peter B. Parker, who's a middle-aged Peter Parker from the Spider-Man multiverse films, which are amazing, by the way. So we've seen that type of Spider-Man before, and I think Tobey could pull it off extraordinarily well. But like I said, man, these casting decisions for the villains of Spider-Man 4 would have been so perfect. And I wish we could have gotten a chance to see this, but we may get a Spider-Man 4. You never know. So I am very sad, though, that we didn't get a fourth film back in the early 2010s. I think that it would have helped, repair some of the damage that Spider-Man 3 caused. But I don't think Sam Raimi should be blaming himself for how Spider-Man 3 turned out. Like, man, I'm telling you, us fans of the Raimi trilogy, we love all three films. Like, you did an amazing job, and you should be very proud of yourself. You and your team knocked it out of the ballpark with all three movies, and you all should be extremely proud of yourselves. So that was the discussion talking about Spider-Man 4. Now, the next film that we are going to discuss, now, this is the movie that made me decide to do this recording talking about canceled films, because this movie, Cancellization, absolutely broke my heart, and it still haunts my mind to this very day. I am, of course, talking about the potential Alien 5, which was to be given the name Alien Awakening. The movie was supposed to come out back in 2015. Now, the information that I'm about to read to you comes from Screen Rant from a person named Colin McCormick, and some more information I found off a website called Tech Radar, and this comes from an article written by Samuel Roberts. So the info goes like this. Through Ridley Scott returned to the Alien franchise with a new approach, many fans were excited about the proposed idea for director Neil Blomkamp, who wanted to make an Alien film calling it Alien Awakening. The movie would be a direct sequel to Aliens, with Sigourney Weaver returning as Ellen Ripley. Another exciting addition was the return of Michael Biehn as Hicks, who was killed off during the opening scenes of Alien 3. Despite James Cameron reportedly pushing the project ahead, it was abandoned in favor of a new fifth movie, which has yet to be materialized. Director Neil Blomkamp, who has done films such as District 9 and Chappie, has revealed the reason why his long-awaited Alien movie was supposed to star Sigourney Weaver and a returning of Michael Biehn never went ahead. According to him, the movie studio's lack of interest killed the project. Now, I just want to stop and say, I cannot believe that Fox was not interested in making a sequel to Aliens. Guys, Aliens 1 and 2 were your highest grossing films for how many years? That was the reason why you wanted Alien 3 back in 1992. You guys weren't having any big box office hits, and that's when you came up with the idea, hey, how about we make a sequel to our two highest grossing films of the time? Are you kidding me? The idea sounds amazing. The minute I saw the announcement of this potentially happening, I was so excited. I've covered Alien and Aliens and Alien 3 on the podcast. The first two Alien films are some of my favorite movies of all time. And to get a sequel directly to Aliens, where it erases 3 and 4's horrible plot lines, that sold me instantly. And the big reason I was excited for this was because you guys can actually look up the concept art for the movie. Every shot looks incredible. it looked like the epic finale that we were supposed to get, 30 plus years ago, Like, it was everything that I wanted. You saw pictures of Hicks and Ripley together again, and you saw you saw them, chatting with a new squadron of soldiers. The movie was gonna have, Hicks and Newt return, and it was going to feature an older Newt. Newt was the little girl that Ripley saved in Aliens, and it was going to feature, the alien ship being brought on board a huge vessel. So it looked like Weyland-Yutani was going to try to get the remaining eggs off the ship. So it really felt like this was going to be the big finale that we've waited how many decades for. And Sigourney Weaver was very supportive of this movie. And like, heck, director James Cameron supported this film as well. That should be all the evidence you need. Hey guys, we need to green light this film. So I cannot believe that Fox was like, we're not really that interested in it, sorry. I'm like, guys, that was a box office gold mine waiting to happen, and you just threw it away. Like, I cannot believe that they made that decision. So in 2015, the director was reportedly making a proposed fifth Alien entry that would have featured Ellen Ripley and Hicks battling new forms of the creature, a sequel to Aliens, more than the other movies, which went in strange creative directions. Yeah, that's putting it very likely. Instead, Ridley Scott's flawed prequel films, but they were somewhat interesting. Alien Covenant would hit cinemas in 2017, which was more a sequel to messy prequel Prometheus. Like, yeah. So, basically, to put it shortly, Alien 5 was canceled because Fox was more interested in Ridley Scott's prequel films, and both of them turned out pretty bad. Both films, the quality, and this is just my opinion, I just felt that Prometheus and Alien Covenant were not that great. The quality of the films were really bad. Prometheus did not feel like an alien film in any kind of way. It felt like an entirely different film. It got very weird, and it just felt like it lost the plot line of what Alien is supposed to be. And then Alien Covenant shows up, and it really messes up the continuity of the story with xenomorphs attacking people, and it's just like, how does nobody know about these creatures? Because in Aliens, when Ripley is rescued and taken back to the space station to be integrated, the people interviewing her make it clear that they've never heard of the xenomorph creature once in their lives. Yet in Alien Covenant, you see xenomorph creatures attacking the main crew and everything. They are just like, how has nobody heard about them? The film is contradicting Aliens in a lot of ways, and the story was a complete, utter mess. And that's all I'm going to say before I start ranting about it. But both films, Prometheus and Alien Covenant, were both very sloppy. And Alien Covenant was left on a cliffhanger ending that's now going to be left open because Fox has no plans on green lighting a third installment. So basically, Alien 5 was canceled for nothing. Like, we're never going to see Ridley Scott's trilogy get wrapped up. Not that it matters, but still, it makes it even more sad that this potential amazing film was canceled for no reason. And I cannot believe that Fox showed more interest in Ridley Scott's prequel films. They were just horrible. So the article continues with, it was a case of both projects are moving forward at Fox simultaneously, and one of them was picked. Blomkamp told The Independent, Sigourney was unbelievably supportive and amazing. Indeed, while he had the backing of his potential star, it was Fox that didn't want to make it. She was always into the project, but Fox just clearly doesn't want it. I haven't had anything to do with that for years. And as I mentioned earlier, the concept art for Alien 5 has still been filtering out on the project in recent months. suggesting a lot of the pre-production work was done to prepare for the movie. It's clear from Blomkamp's tone, though, that he considers the project completely dead. I am just not sure if I'm ever going to be able to get over Alien 5 getting canceled, because the film had the potential to give Ellen Ripley a proper send-off, and apparently I read somewhere else that the story was going to feature, Ellen Ripley fighting the creatures one last time, and it was going to be a passing of the torch where Newt was going to become the new female lead of the franchise, and that would have been an amazing storyline to see. And the fact that we're never going to get to see it, it just makes me so sad. Alien 5 was a potential film that could have made a ton of money for Fox, but again, they just show that they can't make good decisions on what films they should make. They really dropped the ball on this one, and I'm going to be wondering, right, for the rest of my life about what Alien 5 could have been. And I saw recently that Sigourney Weaver has officially retired from playing Ripley, so we're never going to get to see her play Ripley again on the big screen. It's really sad, but I'm starting to make my peace with it. We will always have Alien and Aliens. They are the top two, they're some of the greatest, science fiction horror films ever made, and I will be watching those films for the rest of my life, so I'm very happy that we have those films at least. So, it seems that we are not quite done talking about Spider-Man yet, because movie number 3 is going to be the canceled Amazing Spider-Man 3. Now, the information I'm about to read to you comes from a website called The Mary Sue, and the article comes from someone named Julia Glassman. The Amazing Spider-Man first came out in 2012, kicking off Andrew Garfield's run as the web-slinging Peter Parker. However, the film was a product of a flurry of negotiations and licensing dilemmas at Sony, which had a tenacious hold on the film's rights to Spider-Man. Sony had already successfully produced a Spider-Man trilogy starring Tobey Maguire, with films coming out in 2002, 2004, and 2007. However, Sony had a strict deal with Marvel. If it don't get a new Spider-Man film into theaters within 5 years and 9 months of the previous film's release, then the film rights would revert to Marvel. After the success of the Maguire films, Sony didn't want to give those profits up. The studio originally tapped Sam Raimi to direct a fourth Spider-Man film, but when the director bowed out, they rebooted the series instead. Enter Andrew Garfield, a slightly different franchise title. The first film in the Amazing Spider-Man franchise did well, grossing $758 million at the box office. However, when its first sequel came out, the results were disappointing. The movie earned $709 million, falling short of both Sony's expectations and the movie's predecessor. As a result, the plans for Amazing Spider-Man 3 were dropped. There was another factor at play, though: the immersive, successful Marvel Cinematic Universe. Sony eventually cut a deal with Marvel to allow a rebooted Spider-Man appear in 2016's Captain America Civil War. The success of Tom Holland's Spider-Man and the savvy strategy of plugging the character into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where he could interact with other popular characters like Iron Man and Doctor Strange, eventually allowed Sony to revitalize its own Spider-Man movies with Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man Far From Home, and Spider-Man No Way Home. At this time, Sony hasn't announced any official plans to revive The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Instead, it's focusing on Spider-Man 4 with Tom Holland, and its Spider-Man villain movies like the upcoming Kraven the Hunter. But who knows what the future could hold. If the deafening cheers in theaters nationwide when Garfield appeared in No Way Home. Yes, the article ended on just the right note, because, dude, I'm telling you, I watched theater reactions of Spider-Man No Way Home on YouTube. The minute Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield showed up, the theaters went completely crazy. The screams were so loud. Now, I promise you, someday I am going to do a covering of Spider-Man No Way Home, because that movie was lightning in a bottle. It gave us fans everything that we wanted, and it was just a dream come true. Like, even today, I still can't believe that this film exists. Like, it was everything I wanted. But Sony, I'm telling you guys, you need to do Amazing Spider-Man 3. Like, it'll make a ton of money. I'm telling you, it will. Andrew Garfield's, fame and attention from the fans has not disappeared. Like, now look, at first, I was not a big fan of the Amazing Spider-Man films. I grew up on the Raimi trilogy. I watched those films religiously growing up. I'm pretty sure I know all three films line by line. But the Amazing Spider-Man films, they weren't exactly my cup of tea yet. It took years for them to grow on me. I actually went back and rewatched both of them in preparation for Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, we did not know at the time, like before the movie came out, we did not know if Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were going to appear in the movie. Like, Andrew was in several interviews over the year before the film came out, and every single time if people asked him, "Are you featured in No Way Home?" he said no over and over again. So we weren't sure if he was just, leading us in the wrong direction, like lying to us to keep the film story a secret, make sure there's no plot leaks or anything. Like, we didn't know. But I wanted to watch, the Tobey Maguire trilogy and both of Andrew's films just in case, just to be ready. And when I went back to rewatch them, the films were actually a lot better. I watched them at an older age. Like, when I watched them for the first time, I was a young teenager, probably like, I would say 14 or something. And I didn't like them at that time. But, jump 6 years, 7 years later, when I was around 21, I rewatched them, and they were way better than what I remembered. Now, obviously, 2 had a lot of problems, but, it's still a good movie. Don't get me wrong. It's just the main problem that I noticed with Amazing Spider-Man 2 was that it seemed that Sony was more focused on, setting up more sequels instead of making a good movie first. Like, Sony has been, pardon the language, Sony has been hell-bent on making a Sinister Six movie for years now. Like, they've tried 2 different times to make it happen, and they've failed miserably both attempts. Because there's an after credit scene for Amazing Spider-Man 2 setting up the Sinister Six, but now that after credit scene's not going to go anywhere. But Andrew Garfield's portrayal of Spider-Man is amazing. Like, the guy was born to play this character. Like, he put so much emotion into both films. Like, his acting in both films was phenomenal. Like, Andrew Garfield, man, you are an amazing actor, and you're a great human being. Like, you should be proud of yourself with both films. Like, when he showed up in No Way Home, he was one of the best things about the film. The minute Tobey and Andrew entered the story in Spider-Man No Way Home, like, that was the best portion of the film, was when they finally showed up. And, like I said, I enjoyed both films. I think 2 did, like Spider-Man 3, I think Amazing Spider-Man 2 received a little bit too much hate. Now, yes, the film has a ton of problems, but it's still a watchable movie, and the ending to Amazing Spider-Man 2 is one of the most impactful superhero endings I've ever seen. And spoiler warning if you haven't seen the film yet, but they create the famous scene from the Spider-Man comic books of the death of Gwen Stacy. And Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, their acting in that scene was so amazing. And the death scene was done so well. It was taken straight out of the comic book. They even dressed up Emma Stone to look just like how Gwen did when that whole thing went down. And when the funeral scene and everything was so impactful, like, wait, this is not how it's supposed to go. Our hero always saves the girl. That's how it's supposed to go, right? But, Amazing Spider-Man 2 shows you, like, the hero doesn't always come out victorious. There are casualties, you know? Like, you can't save everybody. And I think that's why 2's ending is so impactful. But still, Amazing Spider-Man 2 is really good. But I think the reason why I think both films, weren't received so well compared to the Raimi trilogy was that, yet again, I think Sony, had a lot of studio interference with both these films as well. Like, the directors for Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 were not allowed to show their full vision on what they wanted. Like, one of the main problems was that both films suffered from deleting critical scenes that should have been kept in the movie. Both Amazing Spider-Man films, had a bunch of scenes cut that would have helped the story flow, and it would have gave a lot of the characters more backstory, and it would have fixed a lot of the plot problems that both films have. Like, a prime example is that in Amazing Spider-Man 2, the film was originally going to feature Shailene Woodley as Mary Jane Watson, and all of her films, like all of her scenes, were deleted from the film. You can actually look up set photos of Andrew and her filming, this alleyway scene where MJ is on a motorcycle. And I'm not sure what other scenes were going to feature her in the film, but they were all deleted, just wiping her away from the movie. And I feel like those scenes should have been kept in, And on top of that, they took out a key scene that I think should have been kept in the film. It was right after, this is at the very end of Amazing Spider-Man 2, where after the funeral is over for Gwen Stacy, Peter's dad shows up, revealing that he's still alive. And then, Peter has a complete meltdown because he's lost, Gwen Stacy. He lost both his parents, so he believed, and he lost Uncle Ben. Like, the guy has had his heart ripped out of him, more than any other Spider-Man, in my opinion. And he has a complete breakdown, yelling at his dad, "Where the heck have you been for all these years? Do you know what I've been through?" and everything. But he finally calms down, and the two of them go find a bench to sit at, and they talk for a while. Then Peter's dad says the famous quote to him that with great power comes great responsibility. And that scene really should have been kept in the movie. Like, there are so many other deleted scenes that I can mention, but those are the only two that I'm going to mention in this recording, just so you can get the idea that both films really suffered from deleted scenes. Like, in Amazing Spider-Man 1, there were a lot of scenes that were taken out that would have helped the villain. For example, like, the villain in that film is Dr. Connors, who's the Lizard, and he's trying to create a formula that will allow him to grow back his missing, I think it's his left hand and arm. But instead, his experiment goes horribly wrong, and it turns him into a giant lizard. And Peter helped him out with the formula, and Peter felt responsible, so he goes after Connors, trying to help him and turn him back into a human. And there are some scenes that were deleted that would have helped out with this narrative. Like, we have additional scenes of, Peter chatting with Dr. Connors, showing the friendship between them. And there was another scene that was deleted showing that Dr. Connors has a son that he's trying to take care of. And I think this would have helped give the villain, more heart and more character, showing, hey, this guy's actually, a person and not just some stereotypical villain that our hero needs to stop. Like, our villains need to have character and backstory as well, because they are a fellow human being like the rest of us. But that was just to give you an idea that both films really suffered from deleted scenes. Now, I think that if these scenes were kept in, I think it would have helped the film's box offices and storytelling. I think it would have, drawn more people to go back and see the film more in theaters. But again, that is just my opinion. Now, like I was saying before, I don't think it's too late to make an Amazing Spider-Man 3. I really do believe that Sony should do it, but I mean, at this point, I don't think they're going to. It sounds like they're full steam ahead to make another trilogy with Tom Holland, so I really doubt we're ever going to get to see an Amazing Spider-Man 3, but with all the circulation going around of a potential Spider-Man 4 with Tobey Maguire, who knows, maybe we'll get an Amazing Spider-Man 3 after all. I really hope we do, because I will be first line in theaters to see that movie. I think Andrew Garfield deserves some justice, and I think he deserves to complete his trilogy. Like, he has earned that. Like, he gave Peter Parker and Spider-Man so much love and care, and he's very compassionate about this character. And Andrew Garfield knows just how much Spider-Man means to fans, and he always brought his A game with both films. He deserves justice, and he deserves to wrap up his trilogy in an epic way. So I really hope one day we do get Amazing Spider-Man 3. Now, this next movie that I want to talk about is a movie I didn't know I needed. A Quentin Tarantino Star Trek film. Yeah, that's right. You heard me right. Quentin Tarantino. The man who is responsible for films like Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, Inglourious Bastards, Django Unchained, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He wanted to make a Star Trek movie. Now, this information comes from Variety, and the article I'm about to read to you was written by Zach Sharf. So, Quentin Tarantino fans were sent into a frenzy in late 2017 after it was announced that Paramount and Star Trek producer J.J. Abrams had accepted Tarantino's pitch for a new Star Trek movie and were working with the reverend screenwriter Mark L. Smith to iron out the script. The project ultimately never got made, but Smith recently told Collider while promoting his latest project, the George Clooney directed drama The Boys on the Boat, that it would have been the greatest Star Trek film. He says, Quinn and I went back and forth. He was going to do some stuff on it, and then he started worrying about the number. His kind of unofficial number of films, Smith said. I remember you were talking, and he goes, if I can just wrap my head around the idea that Star Trek could be my last movie, the last thing I ever do, is this how I want it to end? I think that was the bump he could never get across. So the script is still sitting there on his desk. Now, to clarify what the article is talking about, Quentin Tarantino said that he will only direct 10 movies. So, and he is approaching that. His last movie was just announced. It's called The Film Critic. And they're still in the middle of pre-production, I believe, and everything. I don't remember the set due date for this movie. But Quentin's been involved in other projects, but he says he will only direct 10 movies. So it seems that The Critic will be his last one. It seemed here that his last movie was almost a Star Trek film. Tarantino has long said he will retire from feature filmmaking after making his 10th movie. He has 9 movies under his belt so far, because he views the Kill Bill films as one film. So just to clarify, he directed Kill Bill 1 and 2, but he considers both films one movie. So there's actually a pack that you can buy where someone spliced the two movies together. So, which means there's only one Tarantino directed film left. That'll be the movie Critic, not a Star Trek movie. The article continues with, I know he said a lot of nice things about it. I would love for it to happen, Smith said. It's just one of those things that I can't ever see happening. But it would be the greatest Star Trek film, not for my writing, but just for what Tarantino was going to do with it. It was just a balls out kind of thing. But I think his vision was just to go hard. It was a hard R. It was going to be some Pulp Fiction violence, Smith continued. Not a lot of the language we saved. A couple things were just special characters to kind of drop that into the Star Trek world. But it was just really the edginess and the kind of that Tarantino flair, man, that he was bringing to it. It would have been cool. Smith said that Tarantino's Star Trek movie would have shook up the long-running franchise, similar to how Taika Waititi's Thor Ragnarok created a new tone for Marvel movies. I liked it because I think it's different, but the way that Ragnarok changed things, it was like suddenly it had a different feel for the Marvel stuff. It was like, that's fun, that's different, Smith said. and I guess Guardians of the Galaxy to some level, but it was just like a different vibe, and that's what I thought that it could bring to Star Trek. It was just a different feel. Tarantino's script was a largely earthbound story set in a 1930s gangster setting and appeared to take inspiration from a piece of the action, the 17th episode of the second season of Star Trek, the original series. The installment, which aired in 1968, followed the Enterprise crew as they visit a planet with an Earth-like 1920s gangster culture. The filmmaker revealed to Consequence of Sound in December 2019 that he was steering away from directing the Trek movie. A final blow arrived in January 2020 when Tarantino confirmed, "I think they might make that movie, but I just don't think I'm going to direct it. It's a good idea. They should definitely do it, and I'll be happy to come in and give them some notes on the first rough cut." Tarantino's film was one of several Star Trek movies that failed to get off the ground. Directors Max Shackman and Noah Hawley were also attached to Star Trek movies that got dropped during development. Now, I think this movie had potential to be a very amazing Star Trek film. Now, I'm not exactly, like a big Star Trek fan. I really did enjoy the newer trilogy that came out with Star Trek Into Darkness, and Star Trek Beyond. I thought all three of those films were very well. I think the 1960s original series didn't age so well. I mean, that show, in my opinion, is pretty dated by today's standards. I'm planning on someday maybe binging Star Trek The Next Generation, which starred Patrick Stewart. Star Trek Next Generation aired in the 90s. So I think I might binge that one day. But I think this Quentin Tarantino Star Trek film would have been very interesting. Kind of sad it never got off the ground. It sounded like a potential really good movie. Like, Quentin Tarantino is just one of those people where I think every project that he's been involved in have all been amazing pieces of quality films. So I think this would have been an amazing film if it had been made. Now, we're getting to the fifth and final film, and I wanted to save this one for last. Now, this one's different because unlike the previous films that we talked about, this movie was filmed and ready to go, but it got shelved, and it looks like we're never going to get to see it. I am, of course, talking about Batgirl. Now, this information I'm going to read to you comes from the website Radio Times, and this was written by David Craig. So, Batgirl is a movie that was meant to come out a couple of years ago, but it got shelved, and we were about to find out why. So it seems that, fans of Batgirl may never get to see this particular film. It was revealed in August 2022 that the release of the Batgirl movie on HBO Max has been axed by Warner Brothers, despite being filmed and in post-production. And the Heights star Leslie Grace had been set to make her debut as Batgirl, aka Barbara Gordon, on the big screen alongside J.K. Simmons, who was due to reprise his Justice League role as her father, Gotham City Police Commissioner James Gordon. The legendary DC Comics character had appeared in a number of TV series over the years, including Titans Season 3, but she has yet to appear in a film adaptation of a Batgirl solo movie, and it seems the wait continues. Grace's vigilant Barbara Gordon in her iconic blue and yellow suit with full cowl have been photographed, and with the production boosting a strong creative team, including Birds of Prey screenwriter Christina Hodson, as well as Bad Boys for Life directors Addie L. Arby and Beryl Fallon. The film was also due to see Michael Keaton reprise his iconic role as Batman/Bruce Wayne. While plot details had remained scarce for the upcoming movie, Keaton was expected to appear as Batman to potentially mentor young vigilante Barbara. The film was due to be set in the mainline DCEU continuity, as opposed to the separate universe inhabited by Robert Pattinson's Batman, which had allowed for J.K. Simmons to reprise his Justice League role of Commissioner Gordon. However, now it seems the film may never see the light of day. Batgirl was cancelled by Warner Brothers despite being due to release on HBO Max. Following recent corporate changes, Warner Brothers is once again focusing on theoretical releases and has decided not to release Batgirl in cinemas or on any of its platforms, despite the film being almost complete. Variety reports the studio's decision to shelve Batgirl wasn't made based on the quality of the film, but rather Warner Brothers' desire for DC films to have a blockbuster scale. A change of strategy is underway with an overhaul of Warner Brothers Discovery's content, with streaming service HBO Max facing changes. Batgirl had been due to release as an HBO Max exclusive in December 2022. Batgirl officially started filming in late November 2021, with principal photography having completed in March of 2022 and entering post-production. The cancellation of the film was announced in August 2022. The following cast members had been confirmed for Batgirl: Leslie Grace as Batgirl and Barbara Gordon, J.K. Simmons as Commissioner James Gordon, Brendan Fraser as Firefly, Michael Keaton as Batman, Ivory Aquino as Alicia Yo. These next actors I'm going to name off, their roles were not announced. Jacob Scipio, Rebecca Front, Corey Johnson, and Ethan Cowell. Now, the article continues with, Leslie Grace was to lead the cast of DC's Batgirl movie after the singer-turned-actor recently made a big impression on critics with her performance in Lin-Manuel Miranda's musical In the Heights. J.K. Simmons, who was in Spider-Man No Way Home, was also due to star as her father, Commissioner James Gordon, who is a close ally of Batman, but does not wish for his daughter to get involved in the dangerous hobby of vigilantism. Michael Keaton was also due to reprise his role as Bruce Wayne, aka Batman, which he originated in Tim Burton's 1989 film, and has recently returned to as DC Toys with its own multiverse stories. Brendan Fraser had also been cast as the chief antagonist in the film, taking on the role of the unhinged villain named Firefly, which is entirely unrelated to his other DC role of Robo-Man in Doom Patrol. Little was known about the plot of Batgirl, but it seems the story will focus on Barbara Gordon beginning her career as a costume crime fighter and facing off against the menacing comic book villain Firefly. The film was set in the mainline DC Extended Universe continuity, which also includes the likes of Aquaman, Wonder Woman, and The Flash, but is completely separate to Robert Pattinson's gritty The Batman reboot. The future of the DCU universe is unclear at this time. And that wraps up the article, and I have to say, part of me wishes that this film had been released. I just hate how the circumstances led to the film being shelved, and we're probably never going to see it. Now, I feel really bad for the cast and crew, because I can't imagine, like, you put all this work and effort into this project, right, and it just gets shelved, and it's never going to get to be seen by anyone. My heart would absolutely be shattered if I was in the position everybody was in when the film wrapped filming. Like, you think you've done it, right? You've made an awesome project. Oh, sorry guys, no one's gonna get to see it. It's like, that had to have been a horrible feeling for everybody. I was actually looking forward to this movie. Like, I've seen a lot of the set photos. Like, my favorite set photo that was released, it featured Batgirl and Batman talking in an alleyway with the Batmobile parked on the street, and it looked amazing. Like, dude, I will always be down to see Michael Keaton return as Batman. He's one of my favorite Batmans, and he was, in my opinion, the only good thing about the Flash movie. I think Michael Keaton deserves to do a third Batman movie, but anyway, I would have gladly went to the theater to see this film just to see him back in the costume again. Just seeing him as Batman again, that would have sold me to go see this movie. And I think J.K. Simmons does an amazing job playing James Gordon. I loved his performance in the Justice League film. Like, J.K. Simmons is a great actor. I think he makes a really good James Gordon. I really do. And Leslie Grace, like, her Batgirl costume looked pretty darn cool to me. It looked pretty comic book accurate. I gladly would have went to see this. It looked really promising. It looked like they had the Gotham City look down. It looked like how Gotham City did in the first two Tim Burton Batman movies. It looked like the cast and crew had gotten the Gotham City atmosphere of the Tim Burton universe to perfection. And the set photos, it looked like a very promising movie. I would have gladly seen it. But it just breaks my heart that we're not going to get to see it. And my condolences go out to everybody who was involved in making this. I'm sorry that you all had to go through this. Brendan Fraser has, expressed how disappointed he was that the film got shelved. He makes it sound like it was going to be a very good film, so yeah, it just stings that we're never going to get to see it. But you can actually still look up all the set photos if you go onto Google Images, and it looked like a very promising movie. But I think a lot of the fan base, I was looking at comments that people were leaving after they found out the film was canceled, and I guess some plot leaks happened. And it seems that some people at least were happy the film got shelved. A lot of people didn't like with how the film looked, and apparently a lot of people didn't seem to like the story that was going to be featured in this. My whole thing is I just wish the movie could have been released, that way us viewers could have decided for ourselves if this movie was good or not, But we may never know. And maybe one day it might get released, who knows, but for now, it looks like it's never going to happen, but I think it would have been a fun film to see. But that's going to wrap it up for the covering of the Batgirl movie, and that marks the last film that I wanted to discuss. Now, this was a big experimental recording, and I think this was a lot of fun to do. I thought it was really good to take a minute and try out something different, So I hope that you really enjoyed this recording, and I hope that you learned some pretty cool, interesting information about why these movies were canceled, and I hope you enjoyed yourself, and I just want to personally say thank you for listening to this. And my name is Christian Taylor, and you are listening to the Tales of Music and Film.